Hi guys, it's Miss Zaccardi. We're gonna make cinnamon rolls today using a yeast dough. So to go over our ingredients, we're gonna use a dried yeast that we will wake up using 1 cup of warm water. We've got salt, 1/4 cup of sugar, an egg, 2 tablespoons of fat, and you could use butter or shortening. And then we've got about 3.5 cups of flour, and we've got a little extra flour for our surface for later. Ready to get started? Okay, we're gonna start by washing our hands for 20 seconds. With this COVID-19, everybody's talking about washing your hands. Aren't you glad you already knew this? So 20 seconds, soap and water. I already did it. Next, we're gonna take our 1 cup, using a liquid measuring cup, put it on a flat surface, drop it low, check that level. And we warmed it up to about 110 degrees. If you have a thermometer, awesome, use it. If you don't, think of it like a really hot bathtub. If it's too hot, you wouldn't get into it, don't put your yeast in there. Yeast is alive, and if it gets too hot, you'll kill it. So we just want it to be like a really nice warm bathtub or hot tub. And then we're going to put our yeast right in there, and we're just gonna let it kind of dissolve. It'll start to foam up in a second. Okay, and then I've measured out a teaspoon of salt and 1/4 cup of sugar. So we're gonna put all of that in a nice clean bowl. All right, so I'm adding the yeast and the warm water into our mixing bowl. Remember, with baking, measurement is important. Unlike cooking where you can kind of wing it, you really want to take the time to measure carefully. And anybody remember what it's called when you measure everything out, get everything set up? It's one of life's many lessons that we take from cooking. We call that mise en place, everything in its place. In the end, it makes everything go faster, smoother, and less mistakes. All right, so we're just gonna get that stirred up. It looks kind of nasty. Just break up any bits. You want it to get that sugar dissolved in that warm water. All right, next we're gonna add 1.5 cups of flour. Eventually we're gonna use most of this 3.5 cups. So I'm not gonna take a ton of time to measure it accurately because the majority of that's gonna end up in there. This is just to get our dough going. All right, so now, once I get this measured, we're gonna mix this for 2 minutes. All right, so if you've got a sibling that wants to help you, or you've got a fancy watch or phone or something, you can set the timer for 2 minutes. All right, ready? So now it's kind of like chunky. Now I'm gonna start to time myself. If you have a stand mixer, you could use that too, but then you don't get your workout in. Oh no. So 1 cinnamon roll has enough fat for your entire day. It has about 60 grams of fat. So these are a once in a while kind of a thing. Definitely not something you want to make every week. This recipe makes a dozen. So, you know, if you think about how many of these you want to eat, how often. All right, that's been 2 minutes. So you can see this beautiful slurry of a batter. Now we're gonna add our fat and our egg. Notice I didn't crack the egg on the side of the bowl. It's a good way to get shells into your batter. Okay, so egg and fat. Now we're gonna mix these up. Make sure your fat is room temperature, soft, otherwise it doesn't mix very well. All right, once we get that mixed in, I'm just gonna chop that fat up. We're gonna knead it, and we'll talk about that in a second. We're gonna knead it so all that fat will get incorporated. So if it's kind of chunky, that's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna add most of the flour, not all of it. One of the things that's kind of tricky about baking is a lot of it's dependent on the type of flour you use. It's also dependent on how much humidity or moisture is in the air. So you kind of definitely measure accurately, and then use your experience and your senses to kind of tell you how much flour. You don't want it too dry, you don't want it too sticky. What we're looking for is a dough that pulls away from the side of the bowl when you mix it, but isn't tacky and isn't super dry. So this looks pretty good. You can see sometimes there's still some like butter chunks in there. That's okay. That is okay. All right, so there's our dough. Now what I'm gonna do is on my clean counter, you could use a cutting board or whatever, just make sure it's nice and clean. I'm gonna put the rest of the flour, just gonna spread it out, and now we're gonna knead our dough for 5 minutes. So again, if you have a stand mixer, put that hook attachment on there. But if you're like thinking, oh, I need to work out my arms today, this is great. So you're just gonna pop that out onto your clean counter. Okay, so you wanna put a little bit of flour on your clean hands. And we're just gonna kind of roll the dough. What we're doing in this is we're developing the protein in the flour called gluten. You may have heard a lot about gluten recently because a lot of people are gluten-free or have celiac disease, which is the inability to process the gluten in their intestines, causes a lot of discomfort. But if you're lucky enough to not be gluten-free, then you get to eat all this yummy bread. But what gluten does is it works like elastic. And so as we're kneading it, we're stretching it, we're creating it. And what that does is as the carbon dioxide, which is the gas the yeast is excreting, releases, the gluten traps it. And so that elastic makes it nice and chewy and traps all, like helps it to rise. It tastes really good.
Does it now?
All right, so 5 minutes of this, and what I'm doing is I'm using the heel of my hand to push my dough. Fold the dough in half, push it again, and I just kind of turn it and rotate it as we need it.
Wow, look at you go.
5 minutes.
Whisper, whisper.
It's really important to knead this for the full 5 minutes. Otherwise, you're not going to develop that stretchy gluten, those elastic strands. And then you end up with really flat, dense cinnamon rolls. All right, so we've been kneading for 5 minutes.
Wow.
And as you can see, our dough is really soft. It's like tacky, but not sticky. So it's not sticking to my hands or anything. And I'm just gonna kind of roll it into like a little ball just by tucking the ends under. Okay, then I have a large mixing bowl that I sprayed with some oil, and that is just so the dough doesn't stick and also so the dough doesn't dry out. And I'm just gonna roll this around in the cooking oil, something like that. Take a towel, clean towel, and put it in a nice warm spot. I'm just gonna set it back here on my counter. We're gonna let it rise till it doubles in size. It just will probably take about an hour, hour and 20 minutes, 2 hours, because it's pretty warm in here, so it's not gonna take a long time. And then we'll move on to step 2. We'll roll it out and put the cinnamon and sugar in it. Hi, it's been a few hours. We've got our dough that has risen. You can see it's kind of poofy. All right. Then we today also are going to make a sauce that's going to go on the bottom of the pan and get all ooey gooey. And we're going to do the filling that's going to be rolled up inside the cinnamon rolls. So for the sauce, you're going to get a microwavable bowl, which means it's not metal and it's not plastic. Those are 2 things never to put in the microwave. So I have a glass measuring cup. I have a 1/2 cup of butter, a 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of corn syrup, and 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. Okay, we're just gonna microwave it all together. Don't try to mix it ahead of time. We're gonna put it in the microwave for 1.5 minutes. In the meantime, we're gonna take our 1/4 cup of butter and we're gonna melt that once that's done. And then we've got our 4 tablespoons of cinnamon and 2 tablespoons of sugar. We're just gonna mix this together. And it seems like a lot, it is. But we want it to taste really good. So the more the merrier. All right, so you're gonna spill, make a mess. All right, then we're gonna get a 9 by 13 pan. class. And what 9 by 13 means is 13 inches by 9 inches, okay? If you have a smaller pan, that's fine. You might just need 2 or to do it in batches. Your pan size is always important because that's gonna affect your baking times. So if you use a different size pan, you're gonna have to be more aware and cognizant of how much time your product is gonna bake. All right, so we just put some oil in there. You can use melted butter, you could use any sort of fat. Our pan is ready. Part of our filling is ready. All right, so now we're gonna get our sauce out of the microwave. And you can see the brown sugar, the butter, the cornstarch, the cinnamon have all kind of melted together. So we're just gonna stir that up really well. Out. We're gonna pour that in the bottom. What is that green thing? Some cilantro. We're gonna pour that sauce into the bottom of our pan. Make sure you get all of it. This is the ooey gooey deliciousness on the bottom of your cinnamon roll. So you really wanna make sure you get all of it. Spread it out kind of even. If there's some chunks in there, that's okay. It's no big deal. They'll melt in the oven. Okay. Next, we are going to take our butter for the filling of the dough. And it is going to get nice and melted. We've got our cinnamon and sugar. All right, so let's start working on these cinnamon rolls. I'm going to take some flour, just kind of sprinkle it on my clean work surface. Then I'm going to take my dough, and it is beautiful. It is so soft. So nice. If you're feeling stressed, I feel like baking is always like so tactile. You gotta use your hands, you gotta just like work out your stress. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna roll this into like approximately an 18 by 12 rectangle. So whenever we're rolling doughs, you wanna make sure you get some flour on your rolling pin. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use a 2 liter of pop. You can use a bottle of wine or olive oil. Just make sure the outside's clean. All right, and so the same thing as with kneading, we're gonna really just like step back from our counter, put our weight, some people like to use the handles, I like to use just the pin. And you're gonna start in the middle and just roll in one direction. Remember, we had a lot of gluten development, so if you start going back and forth, that elastic is just gonna pull up. So you wanna make sure, just go in one direction, starting in the middle and pushing out. You're gonna use some body weight, but be nice and gentle, be loving to your dough. The more aggressive you are, the meaner it gets back at you. So just be gentle, loving, making these for your family.
No, I'm gonna eat them all.
All right. So the goal of the dough is that it's equal in thickness the whole way through. We don't want it really fat in one section and really skinny because then it's not going to bake or roll very evenly. All right, so our dough is in a nice sort of rectangular shape. I'm going to take this melted butter, and it might seem like a lot. It is. We talked about how these are not healthy. All right, so I'm gonna brush this butter onto my dough. I'm leaving the top inch without any butter because we're gonna need to seal our cinnamon rolls, and if there's butter on there, that fat makes it so that the dough won't stick with the flour and such. So use all the butter, get all the way to the edges, except the top. If you don't have one of these handy dandy pastry brushes, you can use a spoon. Just use the back to ladle it on and then spread it out. Next, we're gonna use the cinnamon and sugar that we mixed up. So 4 tablespoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. Again, use it all. It's gonna look like a lot. It's supposed to, this is extravagant. The goal is to get it all the way to the edges because you don't want that person with the end pieces to not get their cinnamon in their cinnamon roll. All right, then I'm just gonna kind of use my fork to just spread it out, try to get it nice and even. If I have big chunks, just spread it to the spots where it's emptier. All the way to the bottom. If you have dental floss, which,
I'll throw it at you.
okay, if you have dental floss,
Again, for real.
are we filming? Alright, if you have dental floss, this works great. If you don't have dental floss, you can use a serrated knife with the little teeth. You're gonna saw so that we don't squish your cinnamon rolls. Alright, so to roll up, you're gonna start on the bottom and just tuck it under. And again, you wanna roll it tight, but not so tight that everything oozes out. Okay, so we're just gonna start rolling, rolling, rolling. I'm just working my way back and forth across the dough. Make sure you get those ends. Okay, when you get to the edge, I don't know if you can see this, but like there's like a spot where it's not even. It's dough. Pull it, right? Make it even. So just pull it out there. It's stretchy. Okay, so now we have that top inch where we didn't put any fat. So we're just gonna take water on our fingers and just roll it along the, or wipe it along the edge. Don't get a ton. We don't want soggy. But what we're doing is we're kind of making a paste out of the flour and the dough. We're just gonna wrap that up and it'll stick. If you've ever done like a wonton or an egg roll, it's kind of the same concept. All right, so now I'm gonna roll this back closer to me.
There was a hole. Did you get that?
Yep. Okay, so now it's kind of this weird shape where it's kind of skinny and fat and a little skinnier. What I'm gonna do is just starting in the middle, use my hands, apply pressure, and just try to kind of even it out so that all my cinnamon rolls end up hitting the end, squishing the dough into it, just so that all my cinnamon rolls end up being about the same size. That'll help me to, when they're baking, to get them all cooked about the same. Ta-da!
You know what that looks like? It looks like the map from Dora.
All right, now I'm gonna take my cinnamon. All right, there, kiddo. Okay, now I'm gonna take a piece of dental floss. This is mint.
Yum!
And here comes your kitchen ninja skills. You're gonna grab about 12 to 18 inches. You're gonna wiggle it underneath your dough. Crisscross applesauce. Pull it, and it's gonna cut your dough. Okay? Now I'm estimating to try to get all these about the same size, because just like when we learned our cutting techniques and our cutting skills, when things are the same size, they cook evenly. If we have some that are super tall and some that are super skinny, they're not gonna cook at the same pace. We're gonna have some that are gonna get overcooked, some that are gonna get undercooked. So I'm just putting them in, wiggling them down. That's kind of fatty. All right, and like I said, this recipe should make 12, but a lot of it depends on how thin you roll your dough and how fat you cut your cinnamon rolls. And I'm not counting, so I don't know where we're at.
That was just 12.
Boop.
13, 14. Wow.
All right, now I'm gonna take my pan and I'm going to stick my cinnamon rolls in here. Now I'm just gonna kind of set them up so I can see which ones are smaller. The smaller ones you do want to put in the middle because they aren't going to get as much heat because they'll be insulated by all the fatties. All right, so I'm just plopping them in here. And again, the bigger ones towards the outside, smaller ones towards the inside. All right, so we're going to cover them with some saran wrap with some oil on it so they don't stick. Let them rise again. Once they rise again, then we'll bake them. Now, one thing you could do if it's getting to be late, or you just want these nice and fresh in the morning, is you can just cover them at this point and put them in the refrigerator. Then in the morning, you take them out for a half an hour, let them come to room temperature for about 30 minutes, and then you're gonna bake them. Then they'll be nice and fresh in the morning.